Sir, can we start?
Of course.
Hello, everyone. A very good noon to one and all present here. I'm Shiva Kumar, President of Nishtha, the Civil Service Society of Hansraj College. Welcomes everyone to our Chief Speaker session. Nishtha Society is a society which provides platform for the student, mainly who are aspiring to become the bureaucrat for our nation and is the most toughest exam of our country. The guidance which our society provides has already produced many bureaucrats for the nation. And to put encouragement and enthusiasm to our aspirants' mindset, we bring many dignitaries and eminent personalities from the very same arena. And today we have Dr. Sanjeev Chopra, sir, a person who held the keys of Dream Place for years. Yes, I'm talking about LBSNAA. Sir is with us. Sir, I welcome you wholeheartedly from the entire fraternity of Nishtha Society. Sir,
Thank you.
Yes, sir. How are you, sir?
Very well. Thank you.
Students are so excited to hear you that our comment section is buzzing right now. So I want to do the formality of introducing you because for UPSC aspirants, you don't need any sort of introduction. Sanjeev sir is an IS of 1985 batch and has served in multiple capacities to the both central and state government. He writes extensively in various fields, be it public policy, development intervention, agribusiness, and rural economy, and has served as the director of Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy for Administration. I want to thank on behalf of our principal ma'am and our Hansraj College for sir for generously accepting our invitation to address the gathering. Sir would be enlightening us on a very episodic and relevant topic that we found, that is the importance of bureaucracy in a country like India. And keeping in the constant of time our bureaucrats have, we will be asking few questions in the last. Thank you and welcome, sir, and over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and also to Karthik, because you've both been in touch with me, and I'm very glad that I'm getting an opportunity to address you and through you to all those who are aspiring to be civil servants. Let me first of all say that this is one of the finest careers that you can think of anywhere in the world at any point of time. You know, the first thing about the bureaucracy in India, or especially the IAS, the IPS, and all the allied services, is that this is a unique network of very intelligent, very bright, very committed, and very dedicated people. You see, all of us who have joined the IAS at any particular year represent at that point of time the best and the most hardworking young women and men of the country. For example, what binds the 85 batch with the 2005 batch, with the 2015 batch, and with the forthcoming 2025 batch or the 24 batches, that in that particular year, of the people who aspire to be civil servants, these are the ones who were selected through a very fair and a very transparent process. So I think one of the most important things, one of the reasons why this examination has got the stature that it has, is because you are all selected, we are all selected through a very transparent and a very clear process of selection. You see, when it comes to power, there are many other jobs which are more powerful than us. And there are many other positions which exercise greater power than individualized resources. But those positions are not there by merit. Those positions could be because you've been born in a particular family, you've inherited a very large estate, you could, move into your parents could have been entrepreneurs, you could have been landlords, and therefore you could have succeeded in several things. But this is one job where you get the job because you have the competence, the caliber, and you put in adequate work to get to where you have been. So that is the first thing that you got to look at. The second thing is, you see that whereas all countries need a bureaucracy. I mean, you can't run a state without a bureaucracy. I mean, Chanakya is very clear about it. In fact, all your, even in the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, there are references to ministers. We have the example of Vidur being a very successful, and a very conscientious minister in the court of the Kauravas also. So any regime, Any regime, whether it's a small state or it's a large state, it will need a bureaucracy. Now, the unique thing about bureaucracy in India is that, the bureaucracy in India, unlike its counterparts anywhere else in the world, uh, is that we serve at all levels of administration. For example, the example which I keep giving is that a person who works at the Whitehall, which is the UK civil service, he works only for Whitehall. He does not go and work in Lancaster, he does not go and work in Edinburgh, and he is not really responsible for the management of anything in Wales or Scotland or England and Northern Ireland. He is also not responsible for managing the relations between these things. But the IAS and the IPS and Forest Service are unique services because we serve at every level. We serve the municipal commissionerates, we serve the Zilla Panchayats, then you serve the state government, your district magistrates, you work for the government of India. You also go and work in the embassies abroad for certain positions which are meant for the IAS. And of course, our colleagues in the IFS manage the positions abroad. So, and the IFS also does a lot of work within the country now. So, what I'm trying to say is, or what I'm saying is that you see the role of bureaucracy in a large country like ours is very different from the role of bureaucracy in a very small country, which is a postmodern country also, where you do not really require that level of coordination. For example, what is the sort of coordination that will be required in, say, Bhutan or Bangladesh or Maldives? I mean, no disrespect meant to any of these three small countries, friendly countries, and neighboring countries, but there is no real issue of coordination. But here you have issues of coordination. I mean, you have to manage a district in Manipur, which is so very unique. And I mean, it's so unique that most people in North India may not have heard of the names of districts in Manipur. Likewise, people living in Manipur may not have heard of districts in Punjab. But what this service represents is that from Malerkotla to Mokokchung, to give two examples, and we'll be managing everything and managing such diversity. And it is so important to be able to have some unifying thread in order to manage a country which is as diverse, which is as continental, and which has such a vast tradition, which is a civilizational nation. So this is what is required. And the counterfactual also has to be seen that in the absence of a strong and a stable bureaucracy, nations crumble. Because, frankly speaking, friends, nations are not made by individuals. Nations are made by institutions. In the very, very long run, people will forget who the individual president or prime minister or freedom fighter was. What would matter is the institution. Was the institution strong? And some of the strongest institutions are those which may not come onto the cover page. I mean, how many times has UPSC and Election Commission been on the cover page of India today? But yet, these are the two institutions which create the infrastructure which is required to manage a country of our size, and that is why Sardar Patel, and I keep referring to Sardar Patel because let me also give you a little bit of a historical background. That, frankly speaking, I mean, all our leaders, I mean, Sardar Patel, Nehru, Gandhiji, Dr. Ambedkar, I mean, M.N. Roy, these are 4 or 5 people who were really stalwart thinkers during the freedom movement, but they had a very different conception of civil service. I mean, frankly, Mahatma Gandhi did not really look at the state as a positive instrument. I mean, he was what one would say a person who believed in the ability of the villages and the panchayats to run themselves, and he did not really believe in a bureaucracy. We have to respect his views because just the fact that we do not agree with him on the issue of state that should not take away from the fact that he laid the foundations for a mass movement in this country. He was the first person who drew our attention to the fact that, and in fact, Mahatma Gandhi is on record of having said that till you have social reform in this country, till you abolish untouchability, freedom has no meaning in this country. So he was a great man, but he did not have a clear conception of state or bureaucracy. And Nehru again did not really have a concept of running a state. I mean, he was an idealist. He was one can say a person ahead of his time, postmodern, and he had much stronger faith in the party, and that was perhaps influenced by the communist parties running in those days. You remember that both in the USSR, USSR was of course at that time the prime example of how a communist country is being run, and the dependence was more on the party than on the state apparatus. It was Sardar Patel who was very clear in his mind that you cannot run a modern country without a good bureaucratic system. And that is why when the Secretary of State of India, Secretary of State, because the ICS officers, there's an echo somewhere. Shiva, you'll have to mute everybody else. Okay, should I start? Okay. So you see, what happened was that the covenant of the ICS was with the Secretary of State because he was the appointing authority to the ICS officers. Now, when he wanted to abolish the ICS, Sardar Patel told him in November 1946 that you cannot do it. You cannot abolish the ICS because you do not want to suddenly, leave India into a chaos, because the fact is that irrespective of the regime that is there, you will need somebody to be the principal agent of that regime. So in many ways, the civil service has to be there. It's like a very, very good advocate or a lawyer. Will defend any party, and we all and one of the another very important and very interesting aspect about the importance of bureaucracy in a in a country like India is that we get to serve all political masters. I mean, I for one have had the privilege of working with parties across the political spectrum. And when I joined the state of West Bengal, there was CPM. I was posted in Darjeeling, where there was the GNLF was very, very significant, and one had a real run-in with the likes of Subhash Keating and others during those times. Then when one came to the government of India, at that time it was a coalition government in the center. You had a whole set of coalitions. Then I went back to the state of West Bengal again at CPM. When I was in the first round of my service in the DOPT, we had the BJP regime. Came back to work in the government of Uttarakhand. We first had a BJP regime and then a Congress regime. And I enjoyed working with both the chief ministers, Mr. Koshari, who is now the governor of Maharashtra, and Mr. N.D. Tiwari, who was, late lamented Tiwari ji, no more now. So went back to West Bengal. Again, we had to change leadership there. Mr. Buddhadev Bhattacharya was there. Came back to government of India. You had the UPA with Mr. Sharad Pawar helm. Went back to West Bengal, by which Mamata Banerjee was in power. Came back to government of India. Again, we had the NDA. So this is and I keep telling you, and even for you, all of you who want to join do not imagine the same political dispensation to be there for 3 decades. It's not possible. I mean, it is possible theoretically, but it is not going to happen because the very nature of democracy, and this is the strength of India, that you have elected people who represent several different viewpoints and have been elected, and therefore they have a right. They have every right to enforce what they think is correct, as long as it is within the domain of the Constitution of India. And the Constitution of India is a living document. So you and I have a very important role to play in making this country run. Our job is like the referee, like the umpire. I mean, we do not have to take the bat. I mean, one may not be the opening batsman, but you provide the pitch, you provide the field, you provide the rules, you provide the regulation. You ensure that cricket can be played. So you provide the background work, and without your background work, the country cannot run. And I'd also like to give you some counterfactuals. Wherever, mind you, wherever bureaucracy has not been given the respect that is due to it, those nations have floundered and failed. We have the example of Pakistan. In Pakistan, what happened was that because, unlike in our country, where thanks to a very positive transition that we had our constitution, we had our civil service. In fact, the first civil service exam in India took place in 1948 itself. So India became independent in 1947, and by 1948, we had the first exam. We had the training being done in Metcalfe House, which is close to Delhi University. Some of you might have seen it. So the first set of training that was happening in the Metcalfe House in Delhi. And then, of course, it came to the LBS National Academy of Administration, but that is another story. What I wanted to tell you is that of the 5 reasons of the failure of Pakistan, one of them is the fact that they did not have a strong bureaucracy. Because what happened was that under the state came under military regime, the fourth or fifth year of its independence, and General Ayub Khan was very, very critical of the way. Because when you are running a large system, when you're running a system which is of or a very huge scale, you cannot have that sort of yes, no, right, sir, no, sir type of the thing which the army has. Because in the army, it's very clear. You're fighting a common enemy. And the protocols are very, but how do you manage a complex system like a large revenue administration of, what, 75,000 villages? How do you manage law and order in a situation where you have to respect individual rights and at the same time you have to respect community rights? Because it's all very nice and very theoretical to say that all right, yes, I have a right to be enforced. But there are community rights also which are sensitive. Now, in the enforcement of an individual right, that fine balance between what do you do, what you do not do, is both a fine art and it is also a matter of practice. So, what happened in Pakistan was that in 1950s, the civil service got the first rogering of its time. Pakistan also did away with all its linguistic states. And the other factor that you have to understand is that the bureaucracy plays a very important role in providing that informal advice, which is much above what the current sentiment is. And I'll give you one example. You see, 1992 or 93. I mean, the date is not so important, but it was either 92 or 93 when Teen Bigha corridor had to be transferred from India to Bangladesh. Now, as you're aware that under Articles 1, 2, and 3, it is impossible, virtually impossible, to cede territory from India. India can acquire territory, but India cannot cede territory. Therefore, I remember that in Cooch Behar, the sentiments were running very high, and we had a forward bloc party which then said that there is no way in which you will hand Teen Bigha. But both Prime Minister Nehru had agreed on that. Indira Gandhi Mujib agreement was there on that. So some solution has to be found. And I remember I was the ADM of the district at that point of time. I had written the white paper, and one was able to then enforce something which was against the current sentiment of a localized population. So, do we let the sentiments of a few people in Cooch Behar override the overall larger interests of India-Bangladesh friendship? Of not being able to provide justice to people who are on the enclaves of both sides. So what I'm trying to say is that the bureaucracy, because and that is the great thing about the IAS, is that you will be posted in districts which you have never even heard of. I mean, for one, I come from Kapurthala in Punjab. I mean, I'd heard of Cooch Behar because Cooch Behar, like Kapurthala, was a princely state, and therefore, we knew about Cooch Behar. We knew the beauty of the Maharani, the Gayatri Devi, but other than that, one did not really realize. So when you are there, far off from a place, you don't have that. So you can look at things slightly more objectively. So that's yet another factor which is there. What I think we'll do is, that Siva, you suggest that I go on because, having spent 36 years in the service, I can keep on narrating stories and, keep on talking. But if you prefer that we stop here for a moment and take questions, what is the format that you would like? I'll go with your format. What do you say, Shiva?
So you can continue. We can ask some questions in the last.
No, I mean, I thought it'll better if you ask me some question, any specific thing that you'd like me to touch upon, then I'll do that.
Yes, fine, very fine. Okay. So, sir, as you gave reference to Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel many times, he was the person who laid down civil services in India. So, sir, my question will be the deep roots from the Indian civil services. That during his address to the very first batch of civil servants, he said that India cannot be united if its bureaucracy cannot be favorless and free. Do you really think that our bureaucracy is free from the pressure that put it on it, be it political and social?
Yeah. See, there are two aspects to your question, Shiva. One is that is there pressure? The answer is yes. Can we resist that pressure? The answer is sometimes yes, sometimes no. Are we fearless? The answer is sometimes yes, sometimes no. Are we partial? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Now, it is, as I said, these are not black and white situations. These are not black and white situations, but compared to anybody else, because we have the protection of 311, and because the political leadership also understands very clearly that what the officers are going to be saying is not going to be said from a narrow 2 year, 3 year, 4 year perspective, but from a very long term perspective. Most cases, many cases, they listen to us. Sometimes they do not listen to us. But I must share with you there is a goalkeeper in a hockey or in a football team. Now, his job is to defend goals. Sometimes he may not be able to defend those goals because if the other party is very strong, he may not be able to defend the goal. But let us say that if there was no goal, if there was no goalkeeper, what would happen? So rather than lose, 5-0, maybe you've lost 1-0. So even if you lost 1-0, you put up a good fight. So what I'm trying to say is that the bureaucracy, the senior civil servants, especially at the level of secretary, additional secretaries, directors, they must say the right thing. Now, whether that right thing is accepted or not, it does not really matter. Because at the end of the day, our logo and our motto is also Yoga Karma Sukhashlam. As has been said in the Gita, it is your job to say the right thing. Now, after having said the right thing, sometimes the right thing may not be accepted. Or sometimes what you think is right may not be considered as right by the other person. And that doesn't matter. You must remember that you're not a stenographer to the government of India. You are a secretary to the government of India. And a secretary to the government of India, you're a very well-paid secretary to government of India. So the government of India is not giving you the status and this power to just toe and speak what the minister wants you to speak. We are expected to give our professional viewpoint and explain what are the long-term implications of what is being said. And the other thing is that if we find that what the political leadership is saying has to be done, ought to be done, then why not do it with all full with full passion? I mean, for one, I can say very clearly that the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana was a fascinating scheme. I mean, it's done so well, and I've enjoyed doing it. As the MD of NEFED, I've enjoyed doing so. A lot of, in fact, the conflict that we keep talking about, conflict between the bureaucracy and the politician, I would say that in 9 out of 10 cases there is no conflict. Where is the conflict, for instance, in JAM? Where is the conflict in the right to work? Where is the conflict in the right to food? Where is the conflict in the right to? I mean, these are all hypothetical conflicts that we keep creating. Yes, in terms of implementation, in terms of whom to hire, whom not to hire, there could be differences of opinion. But we also got to realize that when you're running a very large, very complex system, you have to look at, is the key factor being protected or not? You can't start fighting over quibbles or every little thing. I mean, if we start, because what is the job? And let me tell you, you see, we have officers in this country. I mean, who were always nitpicking, finding faults, and saying this is wrong. I mean, if you're so critical, then quit. Our job is to run the system. In running the system, we have to do what we think is right. We have to give our point of view. But at the end of the day, I am a professional, and you will also be a professional. It's the job which is giving you security. It's giving us a good salary, and nobody has compelled us to be here. So if you feel very, very strongly about certain aspects of government policy which you think is totally wrong, then quit. But as long as you are in the service, then as long as the orders that are coming to you are written orders, are orders which come from a legitimate point of view, then we must do our level best to implement them. And in most cases, there is no contradiction. I have not found major contradictions ever with either the government of West Bengal or with the government of Uttarakhand or with the government of India. I mean, I've had the privilege of working with 3 governments, and and as I said, with a wide spectrum of political parties, and I do not see a major problem as long as you are very clear that you are not aspiring to a leadership. Remember, you are not playing. You don't have to be the opening batsman, but you are the person who is the referee, who is the umpire, who is setting the pitch. So you will not be well known. But that's the job. That's your job. That's the essential job.
Okay, sir. It's like Winston Churchill once said, it is good to lose some battles in order to win the war. I think these things happens in bureaucracy also. So, sir, my next question would be a very serious one. That is about corruption. Corruption in bureaucracy. Directly or indirectly, we have this stigma globally that we have corruption in our country. and unfortunately, bureaucracy also find its mention here. So, sir, I want to know why is there corruption in bureaucracy? And I want to add one more thing, that why people are required to offer bribes sometimes.
Okay. See, uh, it's a serious question, and let me try to respond to it. You see, one of the things is that whenever there has been a mismatch between demand and supply, there is corruption. That is one reason. Second reason for corruption is when the system is so cumbersome and so difficult that in order to pass that stage or pass that hurdle, you need to offer something to ensure that your work gets done faster than the other works. So these are two structural aspects which are there, and to a large extent, many of these have been addressed. You see, you are too young to understand, but your father or your parents would tell you that when we were, I remember I was just about 10, 11, 12 years old when I knew what is black and what is white, because sugar was being sold for, if 2 rupees in the shop, it used to be 5 rupees in the open market. A Maruti car, the year that I joined the IAS, used to cost 40,000 rupees officially, and you could sell it for a lakh of rupees immediately afterwards. You had to wait in the queue for a Vespa scooter, Vespa, those Bajaj scooter or that thing. Now, those were economies of shortages, and in economies of shortages, these things happen. Now that those economies of shortages are behind us, you find a problem. I mean, a lot of most transactions today are in the white. In fact, you ask your parents and your grandparents, they'll tell you that it was impossible to transact in land without black money. Today, it's so easy to buy a plot of land. I mean, you go to a bank, and you get your loan and things. So a lot of our problems were structural. Those are structural problems because you're moving from an economy of scarcity, and now we have moved from an economy of scarcity to an economy of plenty. So when you move from an economy of scarcity to an economy of plenty, the nature of corruption changes. It is not, you can never have an absolutely, I have no hesitation in saying that it would be very, very utopian to say that you can remove corruption entirely, because there'll be very large contracts, there'll be very large projects, and there is a human thing there. But what you and I are most interested in is that for the common man, for the man on the street, when he goes to buy something, it should be clear and transparent. When you go to the hospital, you should get your medicine. When you go to the policeman, nobody should be asking you for a bribe. When you go for your renewal of your driving license, nobody should ask you for a bribe. So if you look at all these parameters, then I would frankly say that corruption has actually come down substantially in our country. See, one of the problems is that if you talk to people of my generation, or even people 10 years ahead of my generation, they actually have assumed that nothing will happen unless you make a payment. In fact, let me tell you, a lot of people, you, of course, will understand that there is no corruption in the UPSC. But a lot of people would think that, perhaps if you have money, you can do. So somehow or the other, are the way we have been thinking, we are conditioned to think that, unless you pay money, things will not happen. The fact is that that's not true. Yes, there will be corruption in society. All societies have corruption. And I remember arguing this point at a recent conference of the NDC, where some officer from UK asked me this question. I said, look, some amount of corruption, very, very high level, may be there, may not be there, but that does not concern what you and I, what normal citizens want is that if they go to a police station, they should be listened to. If they go to a hospital, they should not be charged more than what is the written thing. If they go and want to buy, your ration or your things or whatever, there should be no short supply. And frankly, we moved away from that situation. So and I must tell you another thing. And we have to take steps to ensure that that the government provides you the necessary infrastructure and the necessary means to lead a life which is good and honest and meaningful. For example, as if you are the Secretary Industries of the state, then the state government normally would provide you with some kind of an allowance to take care of your entertainment and things. So all these things are are now beginning to get sorted out, you know. And remember also that when you are in an economy of scarcity and shortages, many things, are now accepted. For example, a very small thing like the use of a car or the use of your phone. I mean, I remember that in my father's time, it was, every time the jeep was used for a private purpose, you had to sign it. Now the government has made it very clear that, you pay this amount and it is official. And at certain stages, the joint secretary and above the car is given to you. So a lot of our things have to be structured. So once we structure these things, corruption will become much less than apparently it appears to be.
Okay, okay. Sir, you explained about corruption. Um, the next question is on a topic on which I have personal disagreements. That is about the allocation of same IS officers to various secretariat. Uh, a same IS officer will be transferred to milk department, to finance department. Do you think this system will achieve specialization at some point of time? Because it is against the principle of some famous scientists that if you will allocate same person to different portfolios, he will not achieve specialization.
I think, sure, there's a little bit, not little bit, I think there's a fundamental confusion in our minds about what is the job of the secretary. In the way the government runs, you have the secretariat and you have the directorates and you have the departments. Now, directorates are there to provide the professional inputs into policy. I'll give you an example for the Ministry of Agriculture. Now, in the Ministry of Agriculture, we have we have the ministry, and then we have in all the fields, we have a horticulture commissioner, we have an agriculture commissioner, we have a dairying commissioner, we have an animal husbandry commissioner, we have a sericulture commissioner. Now, they are the ones who are going to provide professional advice into what needs to be done, what kind of seed has to be imported, what is the protocol that has to be done, what is the sort of message that has to go through the ADOs and things. The job of the secretariat, frankly, is to create the budget, is to reply to questions in the parliament, is to provide the aid memoirs to the ministry, and to ensure a larger intergovernmental coordination. So the secretary of a department will get full inputs from his colleagues who will be equal, sometimes even senior. So when I was joint secretary, the horticulture commissioner was in the rank of an additional secretary, senior to me. So what kind of coconuts have to be grown, what kind of mango has to be done, what this has to be done, all that is his job. But when it comes to international cooperation, or when it comes to understanding the rollout of programs, when it comes to procurement, when it comes to to looking at the entire value chain. So that is the job which the secretariat does. So and remember, at one level, as I said in the beginning, the secretary to department is like a very good advocate. Now, an advocate would be taking up a case one day, second day he'll take up another case, third. So it is not the knowledge of the specific subject. It is the knowledge of law. It is the knowledge of how governance has to run. For example, if you have been answering questions to Parliament and you've seen the start question and the unstart, there is a technique to answering those questions. There's a technique to preparing the budget. There's a technique to preparing the speeches for the minister. There's a technique to writing the memoranda for the minister when he's going to attend a summit of G20 or G7 or ECOSOC or some other conference. So those are specific tasks. So what happens is, and that's a point which has been made many times, is that you have a agriculture specialist and you have a horticulture specialist and you have a transport specialist and you have a specialist in any subject. And you also need to understand that there are specialization of the context. Who understands the larger context? Because you could have an idea about doing something, but you have to put that idea in the context of how much will it cost, what are the implications. For example, even a small thing I mean, when I was in West Bengal, we had a wheat blast like disease, which was coming in from Bangladesh. Now, as a country, we have to decide that we have to cut a lot of wheat in Bengal so that it does not spread, because the principal crop wheat is not the principal crop of Bengal, right? It is the principal crop of North India. So these implications of what happens here and what happens there, it's a larger context which has to be seen. It's again like the college, like the principal of your college will not be able to teach all subjects. He is a specialist in one subject. But as far as the running the college is concerned, managing the college is concerned, this is the knowledge of the context. And this knowledge of the context comes because of the years that you spent in the field. See, the first 10 years in the life of an IAS officer, in the life of an IPS officer, in the life of a forest service officer is supposed to be in the field. There you understand that what is workable and what is not workable. Because it is one thing to say, do this. The second thing is to say that, look, hold it. It can't be done. And because in the ministry you have people from Punjab, Punjab in the sense, Punjab, people from Assam cadre and people from Nagaland cadre, and they'll say, all right, this can work here, this cannot work there. And these are all very, very contentious things I'm taking. So a specialist is good insofar as the specialist thing. Example, to give you another example. Now, we produce a lot of wheat, we produce a lot of sugar, we produce a lot of rice, and we procure it. Whether you store these things in gunny bags, which are made of jute, or whether you use, HDPE, now there'll be different lobbies, there'll be different. So who gets these things together? That is precisely our job, to ensure that we bring in the idea of the context to the knowledge of the domain. That is why both are.
So you explained it very, very well. And sir, my next question is related to this question. Sir, I found it like cadres are allocated to different bureaucrats on different contexts. So, sir, do you think that if a person who is from Bihar who does not understand Malayalam would be transferred to those states, will they get specialization there?
Oh, Shiva, please. I mean, if you can crack the UPSC, you can pick up any language in 3 months. Come on, that's a non-starter of a question. It's what are we talking about? If you crack this UPSC exam, you think you can't learn Bangla or Malayalam or any language, anything is very simple, especially when you live in a place. And remember that there is a language training that happens in the academy as well. It does not take more than 3 months for any intelligent woman or man to pick up a new language, especially if it is in one's own country, right? And these days, thanks to Hindi cinema, I mean, you have almost everybody knows some song which has a little bit of Punjabi in it. Everybody's seen the films of Rajkumar. Everybody is doing lungi dance now. So everybody is. So India, thanks to Bollywood, Tollywood, Collywood, it's not very difficult. I mean, I didn't find it difficult at all. And incidentally, I had to pick up Gurkhali as well and Bengali because I was in Darjeeling, and it doesn't take too long to pick up a language.
Okay. So the next question is a very direct one. That is there any need of reforms needed in bureaucracy of India? If yes, what are the reforms according to you?
See, I write a column which is called Conscious Incrementalism. I do not think that the civil services will need a revolutionary change. What we need to do is little changes on a regular basis, because that is what will make the system better. You see, because what happens is that as technology changes, we need to brush up our things. Now, you see, a lot of, for example, before photocopies were there, you needed a true copy. You see, this generation, your generation does not really understand how difficult or how different or how ancient things were in those days. When you did not have a photocopier, so you had to type out a letter and then it had to be certified that this is the true copy. Because you don't know, for instance, 1,000 could become 10,000 in a typed statement, unlike in a photocopier where 10,000 will appear as 10,000 only. But in the case of a typed copy, 1,000 could be made 10,000. Sometimes it could be deliberate. It could also be manipulated, right? It could also be there. It was required that it had to be CTC, that is certified to be a true copy, and that had to be done by a gazetted officer, so that in case there's a problem, there's somebody to be held responsible, because there's no photocopy. And the photocopy came into being, and then the rule continued. So even a photocopy had to be signed a CTC. Now the government has understood and said, no, it's all right. Once it's a photocopy, it's a photocopy, it's okay. So our rules and our understanding also changed with time, right? So earlier things were very, very complicated. Now things are becoming much easier. So we got to, I'm not, and this is all little steps that will keep on happening. This thing will not change overnight, and bureaucracy is not about making overnight changes. I mean, you see, if you want to bring about major fundamental changes in the way things are happening, then one has to be in politics. If one wants to change the political system itself, then you've got to be a revolutionary. And if you want to bring about great social change, then become a monk in the Ramakrishna mission order. So you got to understand what you are and what you are not. You are not a monk in the Ramakrishna mission, or for that matter, I mean, any other religious denomination. I just use the Ramakrishna mission as an example. Or you join politics. But if you are in bureaucracy, then you must know what your role is in bureaucracy. Each one of us decides what we want to do, right? So if you've chosen to be in bureaucracy, then you have chosen you've chosen the path of constitutionalism. You take your oath on the Constitution of India. And when you've taken your oath on the Constitution of India, then how can you think beyond the Constitution of India? We are creatures of the Constitution, right? So when you're creatures of the Constitution, then you have to, I mean, the only ideal that you can uphold, the only ideal that you can, look up to is the Constitution of India.
Okay. So when I was researching about you, I found that you are kind of interested in spirituality. So what lessons you would like to provide to the young generation about spirituality?
You see, your age is the age of karma yoga. Your age is the age to do things, right? In fact, the Gita describes three stages. It talks about yogi, it talks about sannyasi, and it talks about jnani. So the 25 to 50 years, and that's the age in which most of you are going to be in now. This is the age of the Grihastashram. This is the age of karma. And the Bhagavad Gita is very clear that karma is superior to anything else. At your age, at your stage, at your dispensation, it is karma yoga. When you turn 60, as I have turned 60, then you move on to Jnana yoga. Right? But right now, I don't want you to be a sannyasi or a Jnani. I want you to be a karma yogi. I want you to do, I want you to excel in action, because this is your time for action. So yoga karma sukoshalam, that is also the emblem of the IAS. And the academy, the logo of the academy is Sheelam Param Bhushanam. That is, character of human being is the best embellishment. So follow these two things. And this is not your age to turn a sannyasi or a gyan. Your age to do work. It's for us to now give gyan, right? I mean, I can't work. I mean, at 60, you can't work. So at 60, I can give gyan. So wait another 35 years before you start giving gyan, right?
Thank you, sir, for this. Sir, this would be my last question, keeping in the constant of time a bureaucrat have. So, sir, it would be another question from the roots of our country. As we know that 21 April is celebrated as the Civil Services Day in India, after Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel addressed the first batch of civil servants. So, sir, he instructed a very simple thing to all the civil aspirants and to all the civil servants, that it is your responsibility to remove the Sahab culture in the bureaucracy, a culture that was established by British. Do you think that we have closed the gap on that thing, or we are having this still having?
The gap has become less, but it is still very wide. And that gap will not change because of civil. You see, you must understand one thing, that it was only around 2001 that for the first time in our country, the number of literate people exceeded the number of illiterate people. Till 2001, the literacy percentage in our country was such that, you see, a person who is not literate, a person who does not have adequate food, a person who does not have the necessary wherewithal, cannot but be a supplicant to a person who has all the rest. So the changing of Sahab culture is not because the Sahab would want to change. The culture will change because others will be equal. You see, and I'll give you an example. You see, the gap, the intellectual gap or the mind gap that used to exist between an ICS or an IAS officer in the 50s, when he was very, very well read and everybody around him was not well read, that gap was so much that it had to lead to a situation. You see, equality, you do not raise any people, rise to equality. You cannot forcibly create equality. Now, I give you an example. You see, my father was in the Punjab police and then in the BSF. And I remember the gap that used to exist between the constable and an officer because of education standards. I mean, constables recruited when they were, I mean, no constable had read more than class 5, right? So there was a lot of intellectual gap, perception gap between him and the Sahib. So he could not read any newspaper, he could not follow the news, and the Sahib used to read the newspaper and the news and everything. So he felt that something great is happening. Now that you have literacy, now that and let's look at newspapers today. I mean, the quality of the Hindi newspaper and the quality of the English newspaper, nothing. There's no major difference in them. I mean, the same columnist who writes for English newspaper also writes for the Hindi newspaper. So the information gap is becoming less and less. In fact, it is almost disappeared. So the Sahib culture is actually an inferiority complex in the minds of those who are interacting with the Sahib. Now that that intellectual gap is getting reduced, now that everybody is getting literate, more and more people are getting literate, people are more aware of their rights, and they've grown up in a democratic society, it will be very, very different. I mean, look at the way you interact with your teachers today. I mean, this is not the way your parents interacted with teachers. I mean, this is not the way, so every generation brings about a degree of equality, brings about, I mean, I do not think I could have had this conversation at your age as a civil servant aspirant with the next director of the academy. I mean, it would have been, I wouldn't have thought that it's possible. And perhaps the director also may not have wanted to come and speak to you, right? But this is a different generation. I enjoy talking to you. I love talking to you, and you've enjoyed. I think we've enjoyed our conversation. So it's a change, right? So it's a change which has to be brought in day to day. Every day we have to be the change. And as Mahatma Gandhi had said that you have to be the change. So if you feel empowered, in our times, even even from JNU or other places, when we had to go to a police station, there was a little element of, apprehension. Even though my father had been a policeman, there was a little apprehension. Today, I find that young people enter a police station, they go to a government office with a degree of equality, and so it's a positive feeling.
So, sir, with this last question, we have come to an end of a very highly insightful session. I really enjoyed it. Our participants really enjoyed it. And sir, I want to give a reference of Gita, that if you live for yourself, the time will make you weak, and if you live for your country, the time will make you stronger. And sir, with this note, I want to end this session. So I would like to take this opportunity to pay a vote of thanks. But sir, before that, I want to ask you to give some final advices and a motivation to all of our participants.
Thank you, Shiva. The only advice which I'll give to all of you is to work hard, because that's the only thing in your control. I mean, the only thing in your control is working hard. I would also suggest that a little bit of, that we, as Shiva has pointed out, that we must look at the much larger aspects of life around us. And also, I want to make it very clear that joining the civil service is very good, but even if you don't join the civil service, if you don't make it, it should not, it should not lead you to a stage of despondency or despair, because good work can be done anywhere and everywhere. In fact, I always like to give the example of Mr. Huda, who was a bank manager in Dehradun. He really transformed the self-help group movement here. Right? He was a banker. I have examples of teachers who've done excellent work. Examples of prepare very hard for the civil services, but obviously it's an exam in which everybody will not qualify. Therefore, do not feel disheartened with that. I mean, and I want to give another point, and that is that preparing for the civil services is a joy by itself. I mean, I had taken up philosophy as an optional subject for the civil services, and I really fell in love with this subject. I mean, I really enjoyed reading it. In fact, the interest in Gita, the interest in Vedanta, the interest in Advait stemmed also as a part of the civil service preparation. So I think enjoy the civil service preparation, because it is one of the most fascinating syllabi, especially the general studies syllabi. You'll get to know everything about this country, and then you'll be able to supplement your arguments. You'll be able to talk and the next point which all civil servants, all the aspirants, I'd like to share with you is that must make your own notes. do not be a copycat. Because when you make your own notes, not only will you understand the subject well, you will begin to enjoy it. You know, there are enough books available on philosophy and anthropology. You can go and pick it up, and it's available outside JNU. You can photocopying machines, photocopying factories. Make your own notes for this for the civil service, and you'll enjoy it. Best of luck. The country, India is going to be, and let me also tell you that in the next 20, 30 years, India is going to be the driving force in the world. Because I'm not one of those who believe that China will always be, because China has already reached the top of, it's already touched the plateau. And India, with all its faults, with all its foibles, we are going to be the number one country. And in 2047 or in 2050, when you will be at the helm, India will be the number one country in the world, and you would have done a very important role in taking it to that position. My best wishes. God bless. Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, sir. It was such a great conversation with you, Sanjeev sir. And dear participant, I want to propose a vote of thanks to everyone, especially Dr. Sanjeev sir, who spare time from his busy schedule for us. I want to pay my deep regards to our principal, Dr. Rama ma'am, for always confiding us to organize such events. I want to again thanks Mr. Sanjeev sir for encouraging us and enlightening us on a very episodic topic. We really hope that you will always keep us in this way. Our administration is very fortunate that it is backed by the bureaucrats like you. Thank you for joining us, sir. And with this note, I want to inform the closure of this session. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Bye bye.